Women in the room were saying, I'm the first person that people come to ask a question they can solve on their own.
Hi, I'm Professor Leah Ruppanner. As a sociologist, I've made it my life's mission to take down every ridiculous gender myth out there. Like, do pretty people get paid more, or are women better multitaskers? This is MissPerceived.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to MissPerceived. On today's episode, I'm going to ask you a question. Were you told to lean in? Like when that whole argument came out with Sheryl Sandberg, did you buy it? It's not just her, right? I mean, this idea that you're supposed to lean in, that you're supposed to give all you can in every single aspect of your life, at home, at work. We're like the lean in generation, right? You got told that if you just did a little bit more, you could move yourself up the ranks. When I was a child, they always talked about reach for the stars. Do your best. You could be anything you wanted just through absolute hard work. And it actually totally negated any sort of wind that would keep you down, discrimination, sexism, patriarchy. It was just you through your own force and brute will could just overcome everything. You just need to lean in, give it your all, do all, be all, and you will be rewarded. The question I have for you on this, I'm not saying that hard work doesn't get reward. I'm not saying that women shouldn't lean into their careers in ways that men do. But I'm asking you, do you think that maybe this lean in ideology about women are superheroes or superhuman or can do it all actually had the perverse outcome of women becoming the lean on generation? Has it actually switched? What I'm hearing across my interviews and my conversations with corporates, and as I move around the world, that there's this expectation that women will do the work that no one else wants to do. This could be something like office housework, right? I don't know if you've heard this term, but office housework is the work that is there in the office that often is unrenumerated, right? Like it doesn't have a salary attached to it. And it's often stuff that people don't really necessarily want to do. And it also often is stuff that keeps us emotionally connected. So it's like this work of organizing a birthday party or remembering a baby gift or cleaning up after an event. And they call this office housework, and it's most likely given to women. This is work that is often disproportionately given to women. And part of the question about that is like, is this the moment where we expect to lean on women in different ways, right? We expect that they will just say yes. Part of this is in part because for women to say no is risky, right? To say no to work when you are at a disadvantage in terms of power, status, and hierarchy can mean that you don't know when your no is going to be converted into a boxed opportunity. And you don't know when your yes, because your opportunities to say yes and showcase yourself to others may be fewer and far between. So you also don't know when your yes is going to lead to a better career outcome, something new, someone seeing your work, seeing your visibility. It's a real, you're kind of caught between these two things, right? To say no feels like a violation, and to say yes feels like maybe the opportunity to showcase your talents. But sometimes the work that's given to you is bullshit. And it actually is work that won't let you showcase your talents or was never going to give you the promotion. And some of this work is valuable work. It's not invaluable. It actually is the work that is the glue that connects us within our workplace. It's emotional thinking work. It's emotional connectivity. But this is the work that is often disproportionately given to women. I'm talking to you about one little sliver of work, right? So let's take office housework as one little sliver of work where women are told to lean into their careers and say yes. But really what's happening to them is they're being leaned on. They're being asked to do this work that actually should be shared, should be remunerated, and should be not just given to women by default. Let me give you another example of potentially leaning in versus leaning on. So I talk a lot to high-powered corporate women, right? This is just part of who comes into my orbit based on my work. And what I hear from them is like, they do all the work They do all of it. They're leaning in, and they don't want to necessarily lean on other women in ways that disadvantage them. So what they do is, if, let's say they have an assistant, right? They'll ask the assistant to do a very narrow range of activities, but they won't ask them to do a kind of a wider range, or they feel like they don't want to be the ones who are leaning on other women. This is actually incredibly valuable in terms of gender equality at work. But what happens is that the men lean on their assistants in ways that are distinct to women executives. So either they won't get an executive, or, they won't get an executive assistant, or if they do, they will utilize that labor, that resource, that person in a very different way. Now, this is an example of being told to lean in, right? You've got it. You've got it. You don't need anybody. You can book your own travel. You can, do your own scheduling. But also it's a way for women to protect other women from being leaned on. The problem with this is that the men are leaning on the other women. The men are often asking for a range of things, and that sets them up for more success, right? So what do we need in this moment? If you're being asked to lean in and you're trying not to be a lean on, I want you to see the ways in which men are utilizing their assistants, their organizational talent. There should be some visibility on this, some ability to see the ways in which men actually use the resources within the organization to either advance their work or advance themselves. But if we have this as totally invisible, right? If we actually can't see it, there's two problems with this. One is that you actually have no visibility on the ways in which there's exploitation happening to other women being asked to do things that they should not be asked to do, that are outside of their job description, that are actually making them vulnerable or actually do not position them for success. There's no visibility on that. If you're asking women to do that work to raise the visibility, you're asking the person who is vulnerable to be the advocate within the power hierarchy. That is totally unfair. You can't ask women who are at a power disadvantage to just say like, hey, you shouldn't ask me to pick up your kids after school because I'm your assistant and that's not what I'm being paid for. You can't ask them to be their own ally on this because that's risky for them. So you need some visibility on all the ways in which resources within the organizations are being used by those who are in higher status positions, C-suite or above, and see that both in terms of creating a protection for those women who are being leaned on but have no power to lean in or lean out. And you also need it so you can see the ways that maybe are truly legitimate, that actually would be useful for women executives to understand so that they can also start to utilize those resources. So this is another example where leaning in, leaning out, and leaning on can create very different power hierarchies within an organization and very different outcomes for women's careers. Let me give you one more. This came up while I was in London and in a conversation about the mental load. So I don't know if you know, but I'm an expert on the mental load. And I have a book, Drained, Reduce Your Mental Load to Do Less and Be More. Thank you for letting me plug it. One of the things that women were talking about in this audience that I was at a big organization that does, creative work, was they were saying, I am now the default person that people lean on when they want a question answered, that actually they can figure out the answer to the question themselves. This is this idea that we now have more information than ever before, right? We have more technology, we have generative AI, we have our workplaces are increasingly technical, they're increasingly digital. And now we don't even need people, right? I'm joking about that. We don't even need people because all of our answers are at the touch of a button, and we can get answers through AI or get answers through a digital workplace or get answers through digital HR or a HR library. But despite the fact that in theory, all of the information is out there, women in the room were saying, I'm the first person that people come to ask a question they can solve on their own. I am the person that they ask how to, configure the email addresses or, do the photocopying or, something administrative, right? And what they were saying was this is a way in which I'm being leaned on that actually is fragmenting my energy. It's taking time time away from the things I need to be doing. It's draining. It's duplicative. They don't need to come to me to ask. The men in their office were coming to them to get answers quickly for them. But actually all it did was make these women who became effectively encyclopedias for the office, it actually just took up their time. They were being leaned on, took up their time, took up their energy, and actually fragmented their workday. And they would get repeat requests on this, right? They would be often asked the same questions over and over and over that could be found online or could be solved digitally. And so I guess my question for you is, if we say that actually the way for women to have success is to be 18 times better, this is what we got sold, right? You got to be 18 times better than the men. You got to work harder. You got to lean in. You got to say yes. You got to always step up and do. What happens now when actually that leaning in is forcing you now to be leaned on because you are seen as the most competent one. And gender norms say that you can't say no, because if you say no, you'll look like a giant jerk. And so you have to step in a little bit more, and it's pivoted that. And it's very difficult for you to lean out, right? You're leaning in, showing your competence, capability. You got this. You can do it all. That then leads to other people coming to you to lean on you, and you do not have the power or ability to lean out. What does that look like for you? Like, do you agree with this? Does this make sense? Do you see another piece of the puzzle that I've missed? And then what are kind of the solutions? Like, I have a couple. One is to raise awareness about the ways in which you are leaning on other women for their knowledge, for their insights in ways that are often unseen and unpaid. This happens a lot in other areas too, right? How do we see that knowledge is valuable and then acknowledge that knowledge is valuable? Also, can you take a little bit of a break, like before you go first to ask a woman for an answer to a question you can probably find online? Can you take a pause, take a beat, stop for a minute, and not just by default try to get the answer as quickly for you at the expense of her? And then if you have women who are in vulnerable positions, right, who cannot actually advocate for themselves and ask for transparency and insight into the work you do, you then need men allies in there. You need people who have power to say, let's start to see what this looks like. Let's see what we're asking people to do. And you need them actually to raise the visibility, make the invisible work visible. And then we can have an honest conversation about what we can ask each other to do in terms of leaning on, and what we should actually figure out how to redistribute to others or shouldn't be done in the workplace. It creates greater protection for women who are in vulnerable positions who can't ask for it. What do you think? Does this happen at your workplace? What are you asked to do that is an example of being leaned on? And what do you think about this lean in question, right? Like, are you finding that actually being asked to lean in created this trap for you? Or do you think there's other factors going on? I would love to start a discussion about this. I'm going to do a little social media post and see what kind of answers I get, and I'll share them back in and let you know what I hear. But what do you think? How does this resonate? What are your experiences? And as this technology gets rolled out, right, where we're supposed to be able to do everything digitally, are you also seeing that women are increasingly leaned on? Because maybe we can't just replace the human in terms of this kind of sequence, that actually what we want is some personal connection. And we maybe don't want everything to be fully automated, fully autonomous, fully isolated. Where do you see that the drains are being added? And how does this look for your mental load? Okay, that was like 75 questions for you to answer for me. Have it back to me by next week. Thank you. Just kidding. I hope you have a most wonderful week, and may you lean out a little bit this week so you can have some rest and restoration. As per always, thank you for listening to MissPerceived, where you don't need a PhD, you just get to come hang out with me. And I love you and have the most wonderful week. Okay, bye. Mwah.
We are so lucky and grateful that this series is being supported by the Melbourne Public Humanities Initiative at the University of Melbourne.